Good morning and welcome back to Tactics Board. Coventry City visit Carrow Road this weekend in what is an absolute crunch clash in the Championship playoff mix. David Wagner has already admitted what a big game it is for him and his players. Coventry will be viewing it in the same way as they look to defend that treasured 6th place that Norwich City and most of the Championship are probably coveting at this stage of the season. Coventry have had a really good sort of long-term run of form in the last few months. They started very poorly, and I think that was probably to be expected after losing Victor Gyökeres and Gustavo Hamer in the summer. They were two of their key players in their push to the Championship playoff final last season, but as Coventry have done since Mark Robins went into the club and in the last few years, they've managed to regenerate, to improve despite losing some of their key players. They've brought in Sakamoto, who's been absolutely vital to the way that they've played this season. He's been nominated for Championship Player of the Month. He's been scoring goals, making assists, and really key to the way that they set up, and we'll come on to that a little bit as well. Ellis Sims has come in up front and maybe hasn't scored the goals, but is improving his performances and is definitely, again, central to the way that they play. And Norwich will face a system that is based around sort of attacking down the wings. Obviously Sakamoto has a lot to do with that, but Coventry were doing that even last season with Hamer as such a key player in the centre of midfield. That's the way that Mark Robins loosely likes to play, and he is a little bit attuned to the sort of David Wagner way of thinking, in that he will change how he plays depending on the players that he's got and what's best for his team game to game. So there's maybe less of an ideology attached to it, but Coventry, once they do sort of get in their way of doing things, do that consistently. And so you can expect sort of attacks down the wings from Coventry, and that will mean tests for Norwich's wingers and fullbacks defensively. We know that Wagner also expects sort of defensive duty and discipline from those wingers. So I think when I reveal to you the predicted 11 that I think he's going to choose, that will be apparent in that selection, and we'll come on to that. But yeah, I think Coventry will provide quite a difficult task, given how happy Norwich are at the moment to sort of soak up possession against teams that are higher than them in the table. You look how they set up against Southampton and Leeds and Liverpool in the Cup, which, to be fair, I think most teams would have set up like that anyway. But you look at how they've set up against those teams that are above them, and it feels like against Coventry it might be similar. Coventry haven't been absolute disciples of possession, but they have dominated possession in most of their recent games and look like they maybe will do that again as they visit Carrow Road. Although, you know, Norwich are looking like a stronger side than maybe they were a couple of months ago. They will look to impose their attack on this Coventry side, and although they're missing Jonathan Rowe, they do have capable replacements in the likes of Borja Sainz. Christian Fastnacht is finding a little bit of form in recent weeks as well. Onel Hernandez still needs to be contributing goals and assists, but I think his performances have been improving as well. And of course, there's Josh Sargent, and I can't believe it's taken me over 3 minutes to mention his name, but we know how important he's been since returning from injury. He was rested for the game against Liverpool, and we'll be looking to make a real impact in this one. There is also, of course, the deadline day drama that unfolded, and Sidney Van Hooijdonk has signed for the club. Adam Ida has exited. Przemysław Pocheta has exited, and I think Van Hooijdonk, is still waiting for the sort of process of application for his registering for this game to go through. So as we speak right now, it's unclear whether he'll be involved, but I'm going to give you my predicted starting 11 that I think Wagner will choose for the game. I haven't included him just for sort of safety purposes, but it will be very interesting if he does end up being registered, whether Wagner throws him in early. But here's what I've gone for the Coventry game. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Grant Hanley at centre back, Dimitris Giannoulis at left back, with Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean in centre midfield, Onel Hernandez on the right, Borja Sainz on the left, with Ashley Barnes behind Josh Sargent up front. No surprises in goal, and George Long, to be fair to him, stepped up quite a bit with some significant saves at Liverpool, although I think the distribution you could tell there was a difference between him and Angus Gunn, and there's probably a reason why Gunn remains in the team. We've seen what an excellent goalkeeper he's been this season, and I think I've spoken regularly about the fact that he's actually improving on those areas of weakness that we were highlighting last season and the start of this season. He's more in command of his box, he's coming out more readily, and he's probably a goalkeeper you trust a little bit more with balls coming into the box. So an absolute no-brainer for Angus Gunn to start this one, and it'll be good to see him back between the sticks. Jack Stacey at right back, I think, was actually one of Norwich's best players against Liverpool and against Leeds. He really had that desire to drive forward, and you can tell what an outlet he can be. I think he's improved the defensive side of his game slightly, and we spoke about the importance of doing that against the wide players that Coventry have, and how important it is to sort of defend well against them in wide areas. So Stacey's ability will definitely be tested against Coventry this weekend, but if he did okay against Liverpool, then you'd suggest he might have a decent chance, and he'll probably offer a good option for Norwich to attack out wide as well. So I've gone for him at right back. At centre back, it was sort of a difficult decision because we know Wagner likes to pick a left footer and a right footer, somebody who can distribute naturally on both sides, but he also hasn't really dropped Grant Hanley where he's been sort of fit and available. Obviously, he's now missed 2 or 3 weeks from injury after coming back for a short while from the long-term Achilles injury that he sustained at Blackburn last year. But I don't see him dropping him personally. He's obviously the club captain. He's somebody who he's trusted a lot. And for a head coach who's probably defence first at the moment, I think it's hard to drop the player who, in my opinion, is Norwich's best defender at the moment. So I feel like Grant Hanley will be in there, but I'm not absolutely certain because the person I've got alongside him is Shane Duffy, who has just been pretty much undroppable under Wagner, apart from where he's sort of rested him and he's had quite a lot of games or he's been injured or suspended. He obviously missed that trip to Anfield with a back injury. Apart from those circumstances, he's always been involved. And although I don't see him as a left centre-back who's much of a great passing option, as I said, Wagner does like to go sort of defence first a lot of the time, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Duffy even in this left centre-back role. I think when these two were paired earlier in the season, Duffy was sort of put on the left, and although neither of their distribution is probably excellent, they're more old-school defenders in that sense. I think Duffy's is slightly better than Hanley, so it probably makes a little bit of sense to have him on the left, although admittedly I think passing out against a Coventry team that's set up very well, that's drilled defensively and will provide a hard test in that sense, I think Norwich might struggle. But we know Wagner's preferences, and I've based this predicted 11 off that. So I've gone for those two at centre-back, and it's a similar case really with Dimitris Giannoulis at left-back. I don't think he's had the best of seasons. I think his stock has fallen quite a lot from where it has been at times as a Norwich City player. Yes, he's very good technically, and he's clearly one of the more capable Norwich players in possession, but he just hasn't shown that consistency. He also hasn't shown much defensive capability, and I think it's come to the point now where sadly it looks like inevitably he's likely to leave at the end of his contract this summer, and maybe even more sadly, Norwich fans aren't particularly upset about that and probably happy to move on, which is quite a strange set of circumstances from someone who was really gaining a lot of plaudits for his role at the end of that 2021 championship title winning season. So yeah, I think it's a shame that he hasn't shown that. However, on the other hand, Wagner is clearly a big fan and has picked him in most circumstances, especially this season. And I feel a little bit for Sam McCallum because I actually think he's been excellent this season. I think it's probably the best season we've seen from him in a Norwich shirt and probably in his career. I thought he was good again against Liverpool, although he did give away possession in a sort of difficult circumstance for that second Liverpool goal. But overall this season, I think he's been really, really good whenever called upon pretty much. But obviously Wagner has his preferences and you can see why he might favour Giannoulis. But as I said, defensively, I do worry a little bit about him. He would be the one facing up to Sakamoto, Coventry's key player so far this season on the right. And I think he might have some joy against Giannoulis, to be honest. But yeah, neither of Norwich's fullbacks are especially talented defensively. And Giannoulis seems to be Wagner's choice this season. So I've gone for him at left-back. In the centre of midfield, Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean. And I was sort of toying with the idea of putting Sara in an advanced role because that's the role he's played in the last 2 games. He was behind Sargent at Leeds, didn't have a great game and then he was behind Barnes at Liverpool, and I thought we saw slight improvement, especially considering the opposition. But I think with Barnes and Sargent both available, Wagner is going to want to choose both of them, especially at home against sort of playoff rivals, not one of these sides that you're really hoping to get a point against, as it maybe has been against the likes of Leeds and Southampton. So I've gone with Sarra in that withdrawn role, unfortunately dropping Marcelino Nunez, who I think has been very good in both that Leeds game and that Liverpool game. I think he showed himself very capable of helping with passing out from the back. He looks very comfortable in that possession sort of base system when it ends up being that for the short while that it sort of has been under David Wagner. But you can't really drop Kenny McLean or Gabriel Sarra. That said, I think we still need to see improvement from the Brazilian, who hasn't really been his normal self for a couple of months now. And although eyes are sort of turning to that, he keeps getting in the team out of this sort of assumption of natural ability, which he clearly does have, and that he's had links to big clubs. He's been on the radar of very, very big clubs, but he just hasn't proved it consistently enough to be able to get to the highest level. And although I think we've seen defensive improvement at times, that's when his sort of in possession work starts to slide, and he needs to put it all together really to be both a key player for Norwich and to prove that he's capable of that higher level that a lot of people see him playing at. So hopefully we see that improvement from Sarra, but for now I still don't see him being dropped, and for the reasons I spoke about earlier, I see him coming into that slightly deeper midfield position on Kenny McLean. Not much, I can really say. Mr. Reliable. I thought he wasn't actually great against Liverpool, but probably the best Norwich player on the pitch against Leeds, and you can see why Wagner keeps picking him. Every head coach that works with him loves him really, and that might be even the case the most with Wagner. So I expect to see McLean in that team tomorrow, and I don't think anybody could really dispute that, to be honest. On the right, I've gone for Onel Hernandez, and this was where I sort of faced a decision. Yes, with the wingers, there's no John Rowe, which narrows down the options, but that almost makes it more difficult to pick because it comes down to Onel Hernandez, Borja Sainz and Christian Fastak. Sainz hadn't had a great few games before Liverpool in terms of goals and assists and attacking contributions, but obviously scores an absolute screamer from 25 yards. I thought he was excellent throughout that game, and Wagner talked about his defensive sort of characteristics and how he's improving on them. So when we look at Coventry and how much Yanulis is probably going to need help down that left side, I think we will see Borja Sainz in there, and Wagner will be hoping that he can sort of continue that defensive improvement that he saw from him in the weeks leading up to that Liverpool game. On the right, Onel Hernandez, as I said, I think he does see him as a slightly more defensive option, and although Christian Fasnacht also fits that mould, I think his form has actually been slightly better. Fasnacht has been contributing more in terms of goals and assists, obviously came off the bench to score against Hull, a goal that ended up actually being quite a late winner. I think he got an assist against Bristol Rovers in the Cup as well, so he is sort of slowly improving that output, but I still see him as sort of a slightly more defensive, cautious option. And between him and Hernandez, I think Hernandez offers more going forward, and both are seen as maybe slightly more tactically and defensively pliable by Wagner. So I think based on that, I would go with Hernandez. He's gone with him maybe to be slightly more direct at times, but equally I can see a system where he goes with Fasnacht to maybe try and keep it tight against close playoff rivals until late on, and then introduces Hernandez to try and introduce some directness and physicality and pace at a tiring Coventry defence late on. So I can see both of those happening, but just marginally I've gone for Hernandez on the right. And then with the strikers, I've spoken about them enough really. I was quite critical of Ashley Barnes in the weeks going into sort of his Sargent's return, and I didn't think he was contributing enough technically and physically and tactically. It was just sort of these intangibles of leadership and experience and dressing room quality, and I think we needed to see more from him on the pitch. But again, the American has brought the best out of him, and those two just seem to work really, really well together. I don't know if it's the fact that Sargent gives Barnes a little bit more tactical clarity, or maybe he just holds the ball up there sort of at the right end of the pitch more often for him to get more involved. But I think we're seeing the best of both of them in the last few weeks, and I would be very surprised if Wagner doesn't choose them together at Carrow Road. So plenty to keep an eye on. It should be a difficult task for Norwich, but certainly a winnable one when you look at sort of the games that they were picking up points in prior to that difficult week in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how Norwich pit themselves against Coventry. Of course, you can follow every facet of the game across Pinken channels. So go to pinken.com/subscribe for plenty of subscriber exclusive content, including a live blog of the Coventry game. And keep it locked to this channel. Me and Connor are going to dissect the transfer business and look ahead to the Coventry game in a very short while. So look forward to that. Keep it locked to Pinken channels, and we'll see you again soon.